everyone here? ¿Todavía no? Yeah. Okay, so we're going to get the meeting started in a minute. I want to thank Jaime Valenzuela and the Aguilitas de Davis for the wonderful performance. Thank you so much for being here. We are honored by your presence. Thank you. And because they're going to be doing the Pledge of Allegiance, I'd like to go ahead and have them wait here for a second. So we'll get started in just a minute. Oh, Jaime, since you're here, do you want to have all of the students introduce themselves and let us know how long they've been playing?
Of course.
Yeah, great.
Yes. Let's start off with Natalia. So say your name and what grade you're on.
Well, Jaime already said, my name is Natalia, and I'm in 3rd grade. And I've been playing for about 2 years, and what I most love about the mariachi is when I sing and when I hear the music, it always catches a tear in my eye.
My name is Lucas Morion, and I play violin. I'm in 5th grade. I enjoy playing the violin. It's a good instrument in my opinion. Thank you.
My name is Sophia, and I'm in 4th grade, and I've been playing for about 2 years.
My name is Roman, and I've been playing in Aguilitas for 4 years. And what inspired me was my sister because she started out in this group. So then I wanted to do mariachi, and she does the violin and everything.
My name is Benny, and I'm in 5th grade, and I've been playing violin for about 5 years.
My name is Olivia, and I'm in 3rd grade, and I've been playing in this amazing group for 2 years.
My name is Ismael, and I'm in 5th grade. My name is Mateo, and I've been playing for 2 years, and I'm in 4th grade.
My name is Jaime Valenzuela Jr. I'm his son. I've been playing mariachi for about 5 years. Guitar and trumpet.
All right, there you go. My name is Jaime Valenzuela. I'm the proud and grateful director of this great group of kids. We are Mariachi Las Aguilitas de Davis, and my dad right here, Dad, raise your hand. He's the one that started this program in the 1980s. I was actually alumni from this group. I was started just like these kids did, and I was very humbled to take over my dad's footsteps and continue the legacy of mariachi youth here in Tucson, community Tucson. And thank you so much, Adelita, for all your support for the youth mariachis. Thank you.
Thank you so much for being here, Jaime. Jaime's been teaching and directing for 20 years, and his dad, Dr. Valenzuela, actually taught me how to play the guitar when I was in elementary school. So if that gives you a little bit of history on the generations of young people that have been impacted by the Valenzuela family in mariachi music. So thank you all for being here. So we're going to go ahead and do a roll call and get this meeting officially started.
Supervisor Bronson.
Here.
Supervisor Christie.
Here.
Supervisor Hines.
Present.
Supervisor Scott.
Here.
Chair Grijalba.
Here. Thank you.
Let the record show all members are present.
Thank you. And now we're going to move in to the Pledge of Allegiance, and we'll have some of the members of the Aguilitas lead us in the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Yo prometo fidelidad a la bandera de los Estados Unidos de América y a la república que representa una nación bajo Dios, indivisible, por libertad y justicia para todos. Y la que tú eres mi otro yo. Si te hago daño a ti, me without a hitch.
Gracias. Thank you. Yeah. Thank you so much, Aguilitas. We really appreciate you being here. And thank you to all the parents who took time out this morning to bring them here. We really appreciate you. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Yay, Aguilitas.
Yeah, let's go this way.
Gracias. Okay, we'll just give them a minute and the parents to head on out. Thank you so much. Okay. And now we're going to go on to land acknowledgement, and that's going to be offered by Olga Valenzuela. She's an office support level 3 Pima, with the Pima County Department of Transportation.
Which way do I turn? This way?
That one? No, to us. Mhm.
To us?
And you can pull the mic down if you want.
Morning, everybody.
Good morning.
I'm Olga Valenzuela. I've worked for county for 40 years. I started through the SPOT program through Pima County in 1978, and I got hired permanently in 1983. And thank you for this honor. I'm a little nervous, so forgive me. Here we go. On behalf of Pima County residents, we honor the tribal nations who have served as caretakers of this land from time immemorial and respectfully acknowledge the ancestral homelands of the Tohono O'odham Nation and the multi-millennial presence of the Pascua Yaqui tribe within Pima County. Consistent with Pima County's commitment to diversity and inclusion, we strive toward building equal partner relationships with Arizona's tribal nations. And I'm part of one of those nations. I'm part of the Pascua Yaqui Nation. So thank you.
Thank you so much for being here for all of your services.
And thank you for the invitation. I appreciate it.
And so we're going to move on to pause for a pause. And thank you to all of the Transportation Department staff that came to support Ms. Valenzuela. You want to raise your hands? Yeah, thank you. We appreciate you. Thank you. Thank you for all of your work. And I believe we have a video for pause for pause.
Hi everybody, my name is Monica Dangler. I'm the director here at Pima Animal Care Center. And for Pause today, I wanted to introduce you to Hiromi. We are here over in Purr Tower at Pima Animal Care Center. So Hiromi is about 11 years old. She was brought to us recently because her owners just could no longer care for her. And as you can see, she's got a few extra lbs, probably needs to be kept on a diet. But otherwise, she is such a good cat. She loves to cuddle and sit on your lap, purr, and she's just a really nice girl. PAC is still looking for fosters and adopters. We've got lots of great dogs and cats here at the shelter, so please come down. All adoption fees are currently waived. Thank you, and come down and meet Hiromi. Have a great day.
Thank you. Supervisor Hines, you'd asked for a moment of personal privilege.
I did, thank you. So over the past 2 years throughout the pandemic, I have balanced my work as a hospital physician, my public service on the Board of Supervisors, and also caring for an aging father that I have in Michigan. I wish I was always able to participate in board meetings in person, but these various commitments have made that I have made mean that I have to take part in a number of board meetings remotely. Now, luckily, this is completely possible these days, nothing out of the ordinary, and has enabled me to serve my constituents here in Pima County, even when I have to be away from the area. Now, over the holidays, I volunteered to work the night shift at my hospital, as I almost always do, to allow my colleagues to spend time with their families. Because of that, I took a delayed vacation in early January. Now, even while on that vacation, I prepared diligently for the last board meeting, and I participated without any disruption until, of course, a friend of mine who would join me on the holiday accidentally walked onto the camera. Now, we've all had family, pets, friends, and other aspects of our lives collide with an online meeting. This is our new reality, and when it happens, it deserves a good laugh, and I would say nothing more. While I regret the distraction this has caused and have been surprised and definitely regret the homophobia it seems to have elicited, I want to assure my colleagues on the board, as well as all of our staff and residents of Pima County, that I was entirely focused on the meeting, the important business of that meeting, as I always am. I take my commitment to this community seriously, and it is my great honor to serve on this board. I ran as an openly gay man, and I've always been honest with the Pima County voters, who have shown that they are both fair and very supportive of the LGBTQ+ community. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Hines. There are a few items on the agenda that need some corrections. Page 5, item 18, there's a correction to the funding source. It's master agreement.
Is that the regular agenda or the addendum?
The regular agenda? Yeah, on the agenda. Master agreement number MAPO2311, the Tucson Wind Supply, the funding source is 63% general, and wastewater operations 37% funding source. And then on the addendum agenda, page 2, item 9, the staff requests this item be continued to the Board of Supervisors meeting of February 7th, 2023. And I believe that's all the corrections, Administrator Lesher? Okay, great, thank you. All right. I'm sorry.
Objections, then the agenda can be amended as you indicated.
I'm on it, yep. So if there's no objections, we're going to go ahead and amend the agenda. I don't see any objections. Thank you. So now we have a presentation proclamation, and this is to Mel Etherton, member of Arizona Falun Dafa Association, 16th year of Shen Yun Performing Arts in Arizona. I believe Supervisor Bronson put this item on, but Supervisor Scott, you're going to be reading the proclamation?
Yes, and
Okay.
I'll move the item.
Great.
Second.
Have a motion by Supervisor Scott and a second by Supervisor Bronson. Any objection? All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Item passes. Supervisor Scott. Thank you.
I'm not sure what I'm supposed to be doing. I was just told to come.
Oh, thank you.
Lovely.
Stand here with me and we'll read it.
Okay.
All right. Whereas Shen Yun Performing Arts was established by a group of Chinese artists in 2006 in New York with a mission to revive a culture that was almost lost through dance and music, and whereas for thousands of years Buddhist, Taoist, and Confucian teachings were at the heart of Chinese society, forming a strong moral foundation that ensured the longevity of the Chinese nation. However, this tradition is almost destroyed in today's China under communist rule. And whereas China's history is filled with tales of courage and sacrifice, integrity and loyalty, compassion and virtue, Shen Yun artists bring these stories to life on stage, displaying the intangible spirit and essence of a culture for people around the world. And whereas in ancient China, artists believed that to create true art, one must cultivate inner purity. Shen Yun artists continue this tradition by practicing Falun Dafa, did I pronounce that correctly? Thank you. Alongside their rigorous training, the artists meditate and require of themselves self-discipline and selflessness. This is one reason why audiences feel the energy of pure beauty radiating from the stage in Shen Yun's performances. And whereas in Shen Yun shows, themes like spiritual devotion, good versus evil, and the search for the meaning of life appear in Falun Gong-related dance stories and lyrics. These programs touch the heart, enlighten the mind, and resonate with audiences from a variety of backgrounds. And whereas through classical Chinese dance, live music, and digital backdrops, Shen Yun takes the audience on a journey of 5,000 years from ancient to modern-day China, depicting the resilience of a divinely bestowed culture and inspiring the audience with traditional values. And whereas the Shen Yun Orchestra uniquely combines instruments from the East and the West, Shen Yun's all-original compositions feature the perfect harmonies of traditional Chinese music and classical Western music. Now, Now therefore be it resolved that the Pima County Board of Supervisors hereby proclaims the day of Tuesday, January 24, 2023 to be 16th year of Shenyang Performing Arts in Arizona. Congratulations. Would you like to say a few words?
Thank you. I just want to say how proud I am to live in Tucson in a community that supports human rights worldwide, because human rights, it's a worldwide issue, and we take our rights for granted, I think, a bit much here. Many of my friends who have come here from China, who have been severely persecuted, really, really appreciate the fact that they can have freedom of conscience, freedom of religion, freedom of speech, without fear of being thrown in a horrible labor camp and tortured for what they believe in. And I hope that you'll all come to see Shenyang at the Tucson Convention Center, February 11 and 12, and you won't regret it. It's pure, it's beautiful, it's wholesome, it's for children, it's for everybody. And you'll never see that kind of beauty anywhere else in a pure form. So thank you. Thank all of you. I think this is really important, and I do appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you, Supervisor Bronson, for putting this on the agenda. And they're going to want a picture.
It's not a proclamation unless you get your photo up.
Thank you. Now we're going to the addendum. There's a proclamation, item 1, presentation and proclamation to Dr. Cherry Meeks, President, NAACP Tucson Branch, proclaiming the month of February 2023 to be Black History Month in Pima County. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. So moved by Supervisor Bronson and seconded by Supervisor Scott. Any objections? All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Item passes. So for this item, this was an item that was put on by District 5, but I asked our legal counsel, Sam Brown, if he would be willing to read the proclamation.
Oh, nice.
So, yes, we have that for you. And then we have Dr. Meeks here. Thank you for being here.
That'll hold it.
And
Dr. Meeks, good morning.
Good morning. I feel like I should hold it.
Yes. Whereas in 1926, Dr. Carter G. Woodson, a Harvard scholar, established the observance and celebration of African American history, and since 1976, Black History Month has been recognized nationally in February. And whereas Black History Month celebrates the many vital achievements and contributions of African Americans in shaping our country, our society, and our culture. And whereas Black History Month provides us an opportunity to gain a deeper understanding of African American history and its role in creating modern American democracy. And whereas we must acknowledge and pay tribute to the generations of individuals who struggled with great adversity, risked their lives for justice, fought a fight that at times seemed impossible to win, and continue to strive for equity in the American dream. And whereas African Americans are engaged throughout our society as our friends, neighbors, scholars, teachers, business operators, community leaders, and contributors to the quality of our lives. And whereas the observance of Black History Month calls our attention to the continued need to battle racism and build a society that lives up to its democratic ideals. And whereas Pima County is proud to honor the history and contributions of African Americans to our community and throughout our state and nation, now therefore be it resolved that the Pima County Board of Supervisors hereby proclaims the month of February 2023 to be Black History Month in Pima County, and encourages all Pima County residents to celebrate our diverse heritage and culture and to continue our efforts to create a world that is more just, peaceful, and prosperous for all, passed and adopted this 24th day of January 2023. Thank you, Dr. Meeks. You have some words?
Oh, you know I do. Thank you so much.
I did come with some words. Should I stand here away from that? Thank you, Chair Grijalva, and to the Pima County Board of Supervisors for your leadership in recognizing Black History Month and NAACP's work to carry the torch forward in pursuit of civil rights and social justice. My name is Cherie Meeks, and I serve as the president of NAACP and also the assistant dean for programs, diversity, and inclusion in the W.A. Franke Honors College at the University of Arizona. You shared the history of Black History Month, and it started off as Negro History Week, and so we're so excited about where we've come. Here we are now in 2023, preparing to celebrate Black History Month. The national theme this year is Black Resistance. African Americans have resisted historic and ongoing oppression in all forms, especially the racial terrorism of lynching, racial massacre, and police killings, from escaping the plantation to the rise out of poverty and the struggle for equal housing and education to the struggle for voting rights. The resistance lives on even in the 21st century. Black resistance can take many forms. Black resistance is awareness of our history, engaging in the arts, driving political action, challenging racist medical practices, and supporting Black authors and entrepreneurs. There is power in our resistance. The NAACP was founded in 1909. We envision a society in which all individuals will have equal rights without discrimination based on race. Resistance is the fabric of who we are. After 100 years of advocacy, we finally persuaded the U.S. Congress this past year to adopt the federal Emmett Till Anti-Lynching Act, a century overdue. Congress failed nearly 200 times to pass anti-lynching legislation, but here we are. We also rejoiced last year to see the first African-American woman in the U.S. Supreme Court, Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson. Her presence and voice in the highest court of the land is an act of resistance. In the state of Arizona, we are continuing to pursue pretrial bail reform legislation introduced this year, House Bill 2398, and we are grateful to this Board of Supervisors for your support for our bail reform legislation. And later today, I know on the agenda, we also appreciate the Board's ongoing review of the IGA for initial appearance judges and consideration of our ongoing request to better data collection and reporting, as well as consideration of alternatives to incarceration. We are pleased to see the recommendations of County Administrator Jan Lesher that echo what we have been urging, as well as the support for these recommendations by Pima County Attorney Laura Conover, Tucson Police Chief Chad Kazmar, and Sheriff Chris Nanos. We hope you will vote today to adopt the County Administrator's recommendations. We are grateful to partner with you all, and we are excited that we can do this together as we advance equality and justice for all. Thank you so much for celebrating Black History Month as a county.
You have to come take a picture.
Now we're back on the regular agenda. We're going to go to call to the public. And so I have a little, kind of long, but I'm going to go ahead and read it. So, in this community space, we shall observe rules of propriety, decorum, and good conduct. Members of the public are encouraged to sign up and speak during the call to the audience portion of the agenda, and we will all play a part in making sure that everyone in this space feels comfortable and safe sharing their opinion. Board members, however, cannot respond directly to questions raised by the public. I will recognize speakers and maintaining proper order by setting appropriate limitations. Those who want to speak in person or have their comments read, please fill out a speaker card, and I believe we have 11 people that have done done so far. Speakers are encouraged to be brief and must respect the maximum time limit of 3 minutes. The number of speakers may be limited due to a high volume of requests. That won't happen today, though. If speakers have documents to share with the board, please submit those to the clerk of the board, Ms. Manriquez, and copies will be distributed to each supervisor and included in the record. Speakers must state their full name and topic, the topic they wish to speak about before addressing the board. Speakers shall direct their comments to the board and not to county staff or other audience members. We are all expected to conduct ourselves responsibly, civilly, courteously, and with due respect, and refrain from impertinent or slanderous remarks and personal attacks or complaints unrelated to Pima County operations. Speakers shall not threaten, harass, or intimidate any member of the board, county staff, or audience, and shall refrain from using language that is obscene or vulgar. We will show all speakers respect by not interrupting them when they're at the podium, provided these community norms and guidelines are adhered to. I can enforce speaker etiquette by interrupting speakers during their allotted time in order to remind them of community norms, end speaking time of recognized speakers who violate the guidelines, remove speakers from the meeting if they violate these rules in a manner that is disruptive to the board business, or I can recess the meeting until which time we can be continued without disruption. At the conclusion of the call to the audience, I'll ask individual supervisors if they wish to respond to a criticism made by those who've addressed the board, wish to ask staff to review a matter, or wish to place a matter on a future agenda. By law, no more than 2 board members may address any single issue raised during call to the audience. And with that, we'll go ahead and get started, unless the item is being discussed on the agenda. So our first speaker is Josh Jacobson, followed by Amelia Kramer and Laura Hiniup. And I'll try to call them in threes.
Good morning, supervisors. My name is Josh Jacobson. I am a steering leader for the Tucson Crime-Free Coalition. I've got good news and bad news today. The bad news is I'm sure that all of you saw recently in the media that there was a large drug bust on a fentanyl house here in town that had the precursors to become a fentanyl lab. We know that fentanyl is getting worse in this community. We know that through our TPD contacts, we are finding people on the streets that are using upwards of 50 to 60 fentanyl pills per day. We personally have talked to people in the fentanyl camps that admitted to us that they use 20 pills a day. Chair Grijalva, we both have 11-year-old sons. Something that is terrifying to me is the fact that kids can order fentanyl off of Snapchat and it can be delivered directly to your home. This is going to get worse, and where there's fentanyl, there's crime. The good news is you might have seen a story recently about a woman named Charmaine Parr. She is somebody that lived on the streets for several years. She died twice. She finally found herself going to drug court. Through enforcement and treatment, she finally got better. Her story is one of the stories that we should champion in this community. Her story also demonstrates the need for the Transition Center project that we are working on. The 4 parts of the Transition Center that we are really focused on. Number 1, doing a better job through pretrial services. I know that that's going to be on the agenda later today, really making sure that that's functioning properly. Number 2, making sure that when we have people that come from the jail or pretrial, that they are available to go to the treatment services, the wraparound services. We've been told by people in the judicial system that is the best time to connect with people. They're scared, they're vulnerable, and that's when they are most receptive to help. Number 3, once we get people into these wraparound services, we can track them more easily. That makes them more possible to coming back for their next court appearance. There's a big problem where people just kind of disappear into the wind right now. Number 4, we've also got a situation where we need to have real-time data to make sure that we are being effective with this project and make sure that it's getting the return that's needed so that we can actually have a solution, a good outcome, and we're not just wasting money. The last thing I need to say is, Supervisor Hines, you made some pretty direct comments about our coalition a few weeks ago. I'm not sure how you sat through those meetings and your takeaway was that we are disgusting and that the options that we're looking at in terms of treatment and positive outcomes disgusts you. Sir, I have to say, I think that you completely mischaracterized many people that have had crimes committed against them. You owe an apology to the Tucson Crime-Free Coalition, as well as people in this community that have suffered. I'd also like to take it a step further. Come to the fentanyl camps with us.
Your time's expired. Thank you for being here. Amelia Kramer.
Thank you, Chair Grijalva, members of the board. I'm here on behalf of the NAACP Tucson branch, along with President Meeks and other members of our branch. And we just want to thank you for putting item 8 on the addendum agenda today. And as President Meeks indicated, we are in support of the recommendations of County Administrator Jan Lesher, as supported as well by County Attorney Laura Conover, Police Chief Chad Kazmar, and Sheriff Chris Nanos. Thank you so much for your consideration.
Thank you for being here. Laura Hiniup, followed by Stephanie Kirk and Melissa Conroy.
Thank you, Matt Hines, for joining us this morning. Yes, we did find that great humor at your own expense when your boyfriend appeared half naked before everyone
I'm
to
sorry,
see.
ma'am, I'm going to need to interrupt you. There's no personal attacks. Thank you.
Okay. This wasn't a personal attack. It was funny. We did get a great laugh, and nobody is homophobic. Okay, I'm sorry to tell you that. That's a real nasty thing to say about people. We just found humor. Okay, it doesn't really matter what person's sexuality is. If you were straight and it came out with a woman, it'd be the same thing. And it's happened. Okay, so anyway. We would also like to be left alone, to raise our children, to be children, and not to be indoctrinated and be told to give pronouns and be ashamed for the color of their skin or the sexuality they're being pushed to mutilate their own bodies. Children need to be children and be left alone. And what I find amazing is how you wear a mask and not realize as a doctor that it is a petri dish on your face, catching germs from inside and out, as well as outside, growing and becoming just eradicated with your germs on the inside and outside, and you're breathing it back into your lungs and killing your brain cells over time by doing that. During this COVID shutdown, Brian Marche went from hospital to hospital videotaping how the hospitals were empty and nurses were even doing synchronized dancings in the halls across the country. COVID was so dangerous that illegals were coming across our borders from around the world to our hospitals, and those deaths resulted in 150,000 to 250,000 for Medicare for COVID deaths. Mike Hicks, my friend, was murdered in the hospital, as well, and then we had a TPD officer over in Oro Valley that was put on a ventilator. And I asked my friend to go get her medical records, and she did. And we found is that she was put on remdesivir. And I told her, ask to find out if she was put on nutrients, which they're being denied in the hospital, which is starvation. And then you end up putting him on ventilators, which is not supposed to go exceeding past 50%. And then Mike Hicks, he was put on it, and they ended up having where he was on 50% or so, his kidneys started failing, so they were going to try and take him off to put him on dialysis. And then they didn't do that, so then they ended up putting him back up and then up seeing it's at 70% and then 100%. And at 100%, you end up having lung failure. They're blowing out their lungs, and then they start having cardiac arrest from that, and what she ended up dying from. So 250,000 is what they're getting from
Your time is up. Thank you. The next speakers, ma'am, please have a seat. Thank you. Thank you for coming. Stephanie Kirk, followed by Melissa Conroy and Shirley. I'm sorry, I'm going to mispronounce your last name.
Morning, my name is Stephanie Kirk. Is anybody going to wipe any chemicals on my microphone today? No? So it's African American History Month, and it makes me sick to see some of you up here toting it around like you're something special, giving out awards, talking about Ruby Bridges. Like you weren't someone who, Matt, can you please look at me? Because I know at one point,
ma'am,
please don't interrupt.
Going to, ma'am, I need you to speak. Please, your attack. Yes, I do. Ma'am. What? No, ma'am. If you would do personal attacks or call anyone out.
This is ridiculous.
One more time, and then I'm going to have you have a seat.
One more time. I'll have you have a seat.
I am sitting. Thank you. Go ahead.
It makes me sick that you board members have got to interrupt. You sit up here on your mighty fine horse as if you were the rulers of the land. You are literally nobody, Adelita. Keep your mouth shut.
Okay, ma'am, you can have thank you. The mic's done. Thank you. You can have a seat. Thank you.
No.
Thank you.
You know what?
Ma'am, one more. Okay, thank you. Next speaker is Melissa Conroy. Ma'am, if you don't calm down, I'm going to have you escorted out of the board meeting. Okay. We need to have, I'll go ahead and recess the meeting for a few minutes. Thank you. Can I ask the Sergeant at Arms to please escort Ms. Quirk out of the board meeting? Thank you.
Start my time over, Adelita.
We're going to go ahead and recess the meeting for 5 minutes. Thank you.
Yeah, think about what you did. And then come back. I'll be waiting.
Everybody go back.
Thank you. It's like the uncool kids at school, you know?
No, we're not going to do that. Yeah. Okay, we're going to go ahead and, this is my issue. We have to be civil during this call to the audience. We have to be civil, and we cannot have these kind of interruptions. So if these things happen again, we're going to have people arrested, and nobody wants to do that. Ma'am, I'm going to give you your time, provided you meet the community norms. If you don't, then we're going to have to ask you to leave, okay? Can we start the timer, please? Thank you. Go ahead.
Okay, that was a giant...
Ma'am, please go ahead.
Well, don't interrupt. There is no study in the world that shows that masks work well, says Dr. Jha. The White House COVID coordinator said during a recent discussion with the Philadelphia Inquirer that less than 69% of Americans have completed their primary series as of November 24th, according to the CDC data, while only 12.1% of Americans have been immunized with a new booster. The CDC data adds, but Dr. Jha hopes that the figure will raise in the coming weeks as more people get flu shots and potentially knock out both vaccines simultaneously. I just want to say, like, what are going to be the reactions of just injecting a bunch of drugs? Could it be a neurological increase that we start seeing with people? Could it be strokes or sudden deaths? I'm not quite sure, but I could have swore that we've seen an increase of that happening, and we've even seen news broadcasters drop dead, haven't we? So what was Dr. Jha saying now? I think with the big outburst, I think my papers got a little mixed up, but Dr. Jha is now saying that we don't have to wear masks. And before the meeting, Mr. Matt and I were speaking about how we're finding forever chemicals, which is called PFAS. Does anybody remember a water plant in town getting shut down? Because that's going to be the chemical. So when you go home tonight and you're thinking, what did Ms. Kirk say? She said PFAS, P-F-A-S, all capitalization letters. Water department the water facility was shut down because it was found in our aquifers from companies like 3M, DuPont, and they're also made in your masks. Where are we getting our masks? We're getting our masks from China. Go ask Gavin in California. And you guys seem like you're doing something over there, writing back and forth, not paying attention, Adelita. So again, I want to talk about worldview. The building does not hold that many people. As many people as what you guys said so. The contract should not be renewed, and there should not be anybody else from home listening in, Sam Brown, while we're discussing during executive session. We should not be paying for property that is almost 4 times the amount after not looking at it and it being, I don't know, flood damaged. There is a lot of stuff going on here. And it is not a personal attack to say that some of you have, I don't know, a dad in Congress who backs you. That's not a personal account. That is a true fact. So some of you think that you can get away with absolutely everything, and that includes forcing injections, quarantine, tests, and masks on the American people. And I will not sit down and take it anymore.
Thank you. Melissa Conroy, followed by Shirley, I think it's Ricard, thank you. And Anastasia, Anastasia, I'm sorry. Thank you. Go ahead.
Okay, my name is Melissa Conroy. So many items to talk about, from the censorship and the corruption of the CIA and the FBI, including with big tech on the Twitter files, to the COVID pandemic, to the poison of the vaccines, to the wokeness in our schools. The list is endless. But that brings me to my actual topic, the government's mismanagement of COVID. Back in December, U.S. Senator Ron Johnson led a roundtable discussion surrounding the vaccine. Distinguished doctors and scientists who specialize in COVID vaccine research and treatment joined him. Most of the people on the panel suffered loss of income, status, and jobs because they publicized truths about COVID that went against the narrative. COVID policy has been crime against humanity, and underlying that crime has been a crime against science. The senator started the roundtable discussion by reminding us that promising drugs for early treatment of COVID were made known by the spring of 2020, and yet our government agencies were advising against their use, despite long and assuring safety records. Some issues brought up at the roundtable were, one, in the VAERS data, vaccine injuries increased 20-fold in 2021, and vaccine-related deaths increased 50-fold. Number two, the CDC created a system called vSafe for recording a large sample of vaccine safety data and then hid the data from the public. Number three, the number of military deaths from COVID vaccines is about 50% higher than the deaths from COVID itself. Number four, Dr. Pierre Corey, who specialized in pulmonary medicine and critical care as a professor at a university, said that early treatment was the best line of defense, and that 30% of the world's population live in countries where HCQ or ivermectin is taken daily as preventatives, and these countries have had much lower rates of COVID mortality than the developed world, where these medicines were discouraged. Number five, Dr. Paul Merrick has 300 peer-reviewed publications and is the second most published expert on critical care in the world. He estimated that hundreds of thousands of American deaths would have been avoided if HCQ and ivermectin had been adopted as early treatments beginning in 2020. Number six, Dr. Peter McCullough, a heart specialist with a PhD in epidemiology, said the pathway to preventing any more harm is for all COVID vaccines to be pulled off the market immediately. Funding needs to go to the vaccine injured because now the deaths are due to the vaccine, and the autopsy results show it. I'm sure the investigations happening now in the House of Representatives, along with the release of the Fauci files, will open eyes and show the world of this corruption. Do your part and stop pushing these vaccines and boosters.
Thank you. Shirley Ricard, followed by Anastasia, and Tom Litwicki.
Hello, Board. My name is Shirley Requard. I am a registered nurse, retired. I'm an ordained chaplain. My Aunt Wanda is currently being treated at Temple Hospital in Texas, suffering from multiple blood clots in her lungs and in both legs. She's dying as a direct result of being given the Pfizer clot shot and the necessary boosters. Almost identical to the circumstance of my best friend's mother, Carolyn Fleming, who died last year. She was given the deadly sedative of morphine and midazolam and quickly succumbed to that treatment, which was deemed to be necessary because she had unwarranted agitation when she vocally asserted her desire to go home. Indeed, staff, she was escorted to her eternal home with her Lord Jesus Christ. I call on this board to recognize these died suddenly deaths for what they are: premeditated murder with a goal at population reduction. Now, earlier, prior to hearing from Matt Hines about his cruise, I had written something that I thought was pretty poignant, and I still feel moved to do that, to read it to you. Taking a cruise is one thing. Taking a cruise with an unsupervised young male who proceeds to parade into a stateroom wearing women's panties.
Ma'am, I think that's really inappropriate.
I don't think it is.
I do.
I don't think
I'm the one that decides.
I think you need to understand what I'm saying. I want you to hear where I'm coming from. I'm a pediatric nurse with 50 years experience. I know what a 15-year-old body looks like. I'm currently sole guardian of a 15-year-old grandson and his 7-year-old brother. I would just like to see personally the passenger manifest that shows the age of the young man in question. If not, I see that this board needs to be taken to task, and Mr. Brown, to look into possibly filing pedophilia charges against Matt Hines.
That's horrible. Please don't say that. That's not okay. Anastasia, I'm sorry. I'm gonna. Is she still? No? I thought she was here. How do you pronounce your last name?
I'm sorry?
How do you pronounce your last name?
Oh, Tatsakis.
Tatsakis,
thank
you.
Thank you.
Tatsakis.
Hello.
Thank you.
First of all, I just wanted to remind everybody here and online, respect is earned. When you have mutual respect for everybody, what that entails is mutual listening and response. The fact for the longest time has been that we have been here, whether or not they've liked the manner in which it was presented, has not always been listened to or adhered to. But when you take a step back and we look at the agenda or addenda items over the last few months and read the White House statement of Los Angeles Declaration on Migration and Protection, dated June 10th of 2022, along with the Declaration of North America, which Biden signed with Canadian Prime Minister Trudeau and Mexican President Obrador on January 10th, 2023. Pima County appears to be in lockstep with the worldview for surveillance, which is very troubling and growing more immensely disconcerting. To most, migration is people coming here legally, which in fact they are not. Ubiquitous diversity, equity, and inclusion language. We are all equal in the eyes of God. We do not need laws and rules to say what our past has dictated, but how far we have come in correcting the course of the history that we've had, which has been tremendous. I, too, am a minority. Just because I look white doesn't mean that I am. Clean energy. The move now is to take away our gas stoves and our gas heaters. No thank you, that is not going to happen. Conservation of the world's lands and waters, the 2030 agenda, is more nefarious than what a lot of people make it out to be. This is not what it is. We have done much to conserve our lands, our waters, and make cleaner air and cleaner options. What I don't want to see is what I want to see actually is the justification for the recent funding of $11 million to Pima County and $15 million to the Arizona Department of Health from the CDC. Why is that continuing? Why are we allowing that to continue to propagate? It's not in the name of mitigation. This is truly in the name of population control with the World Health Agenda. And I really wish that you guys would just look at who we are, because we do represent the majority here in Pima County. As a new elected official for the Pima County Republican Party and as an elected precinct committeeman for Pima County, I would urge you, if you want to meet with me, I'll be happy to bring you those concerns. Adelita, Mr. Christie, Matt, anybody who wants to work with me, I will be able to work with you.
Thank you. Tom Litwicki, followed by Ann Rose and Keith Van Heiningen.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Madam Chair, Supervisors, thank you for affording me this time this morning. I am Tom Litwicki, and I serve as CEO for OPCS, also known as Old Pueblo Community Services. We operate within all of the districts and have housing and services specifically within District 2, 3, and 5. And I have the pleasure of living in the county in District 4. My wife has horses. They came with the marriage, so we're in the county. First of all, I'm here to recognize and thank you for supporting the Pima County Housing First program. I was here about a month and a half ago or so, and I just wanted to kind of follow up some comments. The program that you've funded and supported over the last couple of years has provided permanent housing for over 200 households, and 82% of those persons are still in housing, reunited families, couples, and individuals. Rand, who you hired to do the independent evaluation of this project over the last 2 years, has put out a report finding a $1.2 million reduction in justice system costs based on this work, 50% reduction in criminal justice and related costs, and a 45% reduction in health costs. The Pima County Housing First program is a key Housing First low barrier program within our work and in the community. Over the last 5 years, we have had the pleasure of helping 3,661 households move into rentals, be tenants in multifamily housing. That's 2 times the number that you'll get from traditional shelter operations, and 3 times the number of folks remain tenants in happily within their multifamily housing than regular shelter operations. I want to recognize that it's a bold move by the county, and it's paid off. The right thing to do is also the smart thing to do, which is always nice when those two can come together. The other thing is the unprecedented collaboration between Pima County, the city, Access, and nonprofits like OPCS to make sure that we drive the costs down for services, bill what should be billed to the federal government, and make sure that the taxpayers are only paying what they have to pay for these services. I believe this should be a model for future homeless programs in our county, and I fully believe and recognize, based on 3 decades of research, that Housing First is what will end chronic homelessness in Pima County. I want to say thank you. I've sent email through kind of the automated system to invite all of the supervisors to come look at the housing that you've supported, talk to neighbors if you wish, see what we're about and what we do. And that invitation is always open. You can always reach me. My cell phone number is the only number I use. It's right on the website. Just give me a call and we'll set it up. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Litwicki. Ann Rose, followed by Keith Van Heinigen and Tara Radcliffe. Okay.
Lions, not sheep. Lions, not sheep. Buenos dias. Good morning. I begin with statement number 10 from the Nuremberg Code. Quote, "Scientists in charge must be prepared to terminate the experiment at any stage if he has probable cause to believe that a continuation of the experiment is likely to result in injury, disability, or death to the experimental subject," end quote. COVID injections are still in clinical trials without informed consent on the world's population. The science now shows that those who repeatedly take the COVID boosters, strongly encouraged by public health experts from all levels of government, are either developing a tolerance or exhausting their immune systems. We don't know, because it's an experiment. Of course, all of this is censored. The criminally corrupted CDC and the Pima County Health Department, who takes the blood money, are still recommending these shots. The shots appear to give the virus properties it did not have before, and now the data show that the more boosters one gets, the more likely one gets reinfected, hospitalized, with a risk of death. It's also the 1-year anniversary, Dr. Hines, of you calling the unvaccinated murderers. But really, who is the murderer here, really? Omicron's faded. More people, noticeably young, healthy people, are dying. 372,000 younger Americans were lost to something besides COVID and non-natural death between the 3rd of April 2021 and the 10th of September 2022. Now there are terms such as turbo cancer and sudden adult death syndrome. It is true that young people died suddenly in the past. But what's hard to explain today is the explosion of these accounts in the wake of a massive rollout of a mandated and heavily marketed experimental injection designed to modify DNA to produce the damaging coronavirus spike protein and powerfully modulate the immune system. There's an obvious public health crisis, but not a word about it on the Pima County Board of Health agenda. Meeting is tomorrow. There's not a word. All last year, the medical director from Pima County's Public Health Department never mentioned the injuries and death in our director's report, only the cases and the vax rates. for each of you. I have a CD.
Thank you. You can go ahead and give it to the clerk and we'll see it. Thank you. All right. Keith Van Heinigen, followed by Tara Ratliff and Brooke Dope. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Keith Van Heinigen. I've been a long-time Pima County resident, nearly a quarter century, but this morning I want to give a big hand to my girlfriends, as my wife calls y'all. You're more eloquent than I. You got your facts together, and apparently you're better students. Now, I am a naturalized citizen. I was born in England. My father was a military man. I got here when I was 3.5. I'm sure I had a couple of vaccines back then. The next time I had vaccines was Fort Benning, going through basic, and I got like 17 shots in one day. Felt like, you know what, for a week. I haven't had a vaccine since. I don't plan on getting any, mainly due to my own heart issues. I had a rough life, worked outside most of it, been through 20 dang operations, love doctors in general. I mean, if you've ever had your head half chopped off and your head tilted back like a Pez dispenser and you're awake, there's a doctor there, or you're not going to make it. Now, we got issues between crime and poverty. It's pretty darn bad. And I've been coming to these meetings for 17 dang years. I've seen a lot of faces come and go up there. See, we rearranged the bench a little. I remember when that was Richard's seat, and we'd go back and forth. But I also remember going down to USD during the mass riots, whatever you want to call them. And I've watched USD all these years too. And as a father, I thank God my daughter never had to go to these schools, because they perform at the lowest levels I've ever seen in my travels. And now today, Adelita opened up and destroyed any credibility this board has about freedom or freedom of speech. The end.
Thank you. Tara Ratliff, followed by Brooke Dodal and Drew Heaton. And that is our last, Drew is our last speaker. Oh, and then I'm sorry. And then I have two online that right after you all call on them.
My name is Tara Ratliff. I'm going to talk about irresponsible governing. Fiscally, you are wasting our taxpayer dollars on housing, feeding, and transporting illegal aliens when we have homeless, crime, and dangerous drug issues that need our financial resources. Zero-emission vehicles and climate change. Electric vehicles use lithium-ion batteries. The impacts of mining for lithium on the environment include potential industrial-scale habitat destruction, chemical contamination, and high levels of water consumption. The extra materials and energy involved in manufacturing these batteries mean that the carbon emissions associated with producing an electric car are higher than those of a regular vehicle by as much as 38%. Recharging the vehicle will involve a degree of dependence on either coal or gas-fired power stations. Will our grid support the extra usage? Will the taxpayers have to pay for charging stations? Battery life is greatly shortened by heat, and replacement batteries cost $30,000 to $40,000 apiece. The tech in the cars rapidly becomes outdated and problematic. These can These cars can depreciate more than 50% after 3 years. An electric car has high-level technology and a connection to the internet, which makes them a more likely target for hackers. They can access data and steal a car, but also can remotely control it. Water and electrical grid. American Battery Factory will use 150,000 gallons of water a day. You all know we live in the desert, right? And the stated high energy consumption will put another strain on our electrical grid. COVID mitigation. Businesses were coerced into complying with the Pima County Health Department COVID rules by having employees go to their business and threaten to pull their permits for minor violations if they didn't follow them. Fact. Testimony of a business owner. Pima County Health Department created an atmosphere of fear and panic when they declared hundreds of people had died from COVID when there were less than 10 people that died from it, all others with COVID. Fact. Statement from a medical examiner employee. County employees were coerced into injecting an mRNA gene therapy into their bodies and that had no long-term testing in order to keep their jobs. Worldview. Continuing contracts with companies that themselves are fiscally irresponsible by being in arrears for hundreds of thousands of dollars on lease payments. Diversity, equity, and inclusion woke ideology. Martin Luther King Jr. talked about not judging a person by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. Woke culture is seeking to overturn that, and it's a new form of racism. We are watching you. It's time to wake up and recognize the harm you have caused, correct what you have done, or leave office so that someone who has the people's best interest in mind can fix this mess.
Thank you. We're going to go ahead and add Joan DiFilippo is on the line. Miss Joan DiFilippo. Joan DiFilippo? Joanne, are you on the line?
Dr. Joanne DiFilippo.
Thank you, Dr. Joanne DiFilippo. Go ahead, please.
Okay, thank you. Good morning. My name is Dr. Joanne DiFilippo, and I'm a Pima County taxpayer from District 3. I'm here today to address two items. First, I'd like to address the need for the supervisors to adopt a formal policy regarding supervisor participation in executive sessions. This is especially pertinent in instances where the supervisor is accessing the executive session remotely. Failure to address remote access of supervisor participating in executive sessions can lead to potential issues surrounding breach of the terms of the executive session as identified in both the Arizona Revised Statutes and the Pima County Board of Supervisors policy. It is for the benefit of all, including taxpayers, that I bring this request forward. In reference to my comments stated above just now and the comments made earlier today, please be advised that my comments are presented strictly in the context of parliamentary procedure and should not be conflated with any claims of gender expression and/or identity. Second, today's agenda includes the approval of the appointment of Mr. Russell True to the Pima County Fair Race Commission. The Commission's role is to advise and assist the supervisors on matters relating to the Commission's meetings, conduct meetings for the benefit of the county, and perform other duties in furtherance of horse racing. Inasmuch as Mr. True serves as the chairman of the executive committee of the Rillito Park Foundation, which is inclusive of Rillito Racing, who happens to be the county's lessee responsible for horse racing operations at Rillito Park. This appointment to the Fair Race Commission appears to pose a potential conflict of interest for Mr. True to serve in both capacities. Again, Mr. True is an outstanding member of this community, and I voice no objection to Mr. True as a community member. My objection is to the potential conflict of interest inserted should Mr. True continue to serve as chair of the Rillito Park Foundation's Executive Committee, as well as an appointed commissioner serving on the Pima County Fair Race Commission. For that reason alone, I recommend that the Board of Supervisors do not approve the appointment of Mr. Russell True to the Pima County Fair Race Commission. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. DiFilippo. Kevin Daly is also on the line.
Hi. Hi. My name is Kevin Daly. Good morning, supervisors. As a steering leader of the Tucson Crime-Free Coalition, I want to recognize the extraordinary leadership of Supervisors Bronson, Christie, and Scott. These supervisors have understood and recognized all the way back to 23 weeks ago when we founded that the citizens of Pima County are saying that their personal safety and addressing crime is their number one concern. I hope today we'll stay focused on the issues that affect safety and quality of life in Pima County. This will be addressed again today in the addendum items 5. The Tucson Crime Free has been working hand in hand with county staff and with the support of Supervisors Bronson, Christie, and Scott in developing solutions that will bring help to those in need and want it, but hold accountable those that are committing crimes. Our businesses are under attack by crime. They're closing, they're under the threat of closing, or have to raise prices to pay for increased insurance costs, shoplifting, organized retail theft, and constant broken windows. The new fencing and the need for 24-hour security, it's what we call the crime tax. The citizens are feeling it. In our 23 weeks of going from 4 to 2,500 members in Pima County, Tucson Crime Free has been told by the city and the county workers that they've never seen the unprecedented level of urgency since our founding to change and develop a regional solution addressing crime in Pima County. As a final comment, I'd like to, we all know that fentanyl crisis, including addiction, is fueling crime in Pima County. Pima County is ground zero in federal for fatal and non-fatal overdoses. Seattle made news yesterday noting that they're running out of morgue space for fentanyl overdose victims. Let us choose not to make that same news. Regardless of how others are choosing to address crime and the contributors of crime in their communities, we in Pima County have the power and ability to implement solutions that are best for Pima County. Let's continue to take control of our future and safety. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Daly. We have Brooke Dodal and Drew Heaton.
Hello, good morning. My name is Brooke Doty. I'm a taxpayer here in Pima County. I'm here today to congratulate the board. Congratulations to Chairman Grijalva for her new leadership role on the board. And I had an opportunity this week to read Pima Board of Supervisor Policy D21.2, Delta 21.2, and I want to thank you for publishing this document. Members of the Board of Supervisors, your published document says it has clear guidelines and standards for conduct in Pima County. Thank you for making these conduct standards applicable to everyone, employees, applicants, vendors, contractors, members of the public, anyone who's on county property or interacts with county employees are subject to these standards of conduct. Thank you. I want to thank you for making these standards mandatory reporting of the potential of the misconduct of these standards taken seriously, and that supervisors and leaders cannot dismiss potential violations or poo-poo them or disregard them. Thank you for making that firm stand. I want to thank you for making reporting of potential violations of these standards mandatory to the Pima County HR Department. I want to thank you for making investigation of potential violations of your standards mandatory. And I want to thank you for making mandatory requirements that leaders take immediate and effective steps to prevent any future violations of these conduct standards should they occur. Thank you for putting out these standards of conduct. It's the right thing to do, as you point out in your policy, it's the right thing to do, not just because it might prevent violations of state and federal law, but because it's the right thing to do because it prevents creation of a culture at the county that might be hostile or intimidating or might demoralize the city's the employees of the county. So thank you for policy D21.2. the mandatory reporting, the mandatory investigation, and the requirement that leaders take immediate and effective steps to prevent anything like this from happening in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. And Drew Heaton is our final speaker.
Hi. For the record, my name is Drew Heaton, and there's so much that I wish I could say. The question is, I'm not sure what you will hear. only Supervisor Christie and Supervisor Bronson will recognize me as the once extremely angry activist that I once was. So I recognize a lot of the passion in the room. For the record, I don't mind saying that everything that Stephanie and Rose and other people have stated, if it were allowed, the discovery of litigation in a courtroom, you would see that it is actually the truth. And that it would hold up in court, not that the unvaccinated are killing people. That would not actually hold up in court. So I'd like to ask you and others what we wish to accomplish. And I'll tell you what I wish to accomplish here in my community and why I am no longer that angry person. I don't want to be. I seek unity and compassion in our community. I know that when you hear information like about the vaccines and how they are affecting other people, it has to be running through your mind and others, well, I got it and I'm okay. I think we need to realize that it doesn't have to happen to us for it to matter to us. Just because you're okay eating peanut butter doesn't mean you can force peanut butter down someone else's throat, or antibiotics, or penicillin. Like, this is very well understood in science, that there's no one size fits all. So I share the compassion and passion, actually, that many of my fellow residents share that have shared these things with you. I am praying and pleading for each and every one of you to listen and to be open to the information that can and should be shared with you. As an individual, I have been watching the vaccine issue for the last 30 years. As an individual, I have been speaking out long before the current scenario for the last 10 years for informed medical consent, medical and health consent. Sometimes people die and are injured when they're administered vaccines. And that is actually memorialized on the national level. Thank you.
Thank you for your time. All right, so the call to the audience is closed, and I'd like to ask if any board member wish to ask staff to review a matter, ask that a matter be put on a future agenda, or address any criticism. Okay. Seeing none, we're going to move on. All right. So I'm going to ask the indulgence of the board if we can take out of order addendum item 8 and addendum item 6 next on the agenda. Is there any objection to that? Okay. Seeing none, we're going to go ahead and move in that direction. So addendum item 8 is a process to review initial appearances, and I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to our County Administrator, Lesha.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. What you have before you today is recommendations regarding a path forward to develop an intergovernmental agreement between Pima County and the City of Tucson regarding initial appearances and the provision of such by city personnel in the magistrate court. As you recall, this has come to the board previously, and what we're looking today is a recommendation to take, excuse me, the work plan that you all received as presented by the presiding Judge Bergen in December of 2022, and to that I've added a few other recommendations that you have before you. It would be to add the County Attorney's Office, Public Defense Services, Tucson City Court, in addition to those groups that have been identified in Judge Bergen's letter, that we encourage to be added to that, representative of the Pima County Sheriff's Department and the Tucson Police Department, particularly when there's discussion about the development of electronic or location monitoring devices. And we also are recommending that the data and reporting work group that has been recommended by Judge Bergen consider for inclusion in the IGA requirements for daily data collection. As you know, data collection has been critical and addressed by many. And then we look at monthly or quarterly reporting of the data to the county administrator and board of supervisors. And that will include bail information and a lot of data about individuals specifically. I'm asking that we direct the court and these work groups to come back in April so that we can finalize an intergovernmental agreement, we hope in May, by this board so that it can go, any of the financial considerations could be included in next year's budget, and that you're directing us to work with, because it might be impacting the budget, to work with both Superior Court and the Sheriff's Department to see if there's any supplementary data requests or budget requests for data collection and reporting capabilities. We're asking for a great deal in that area, and there may be some budget considerations regarding the implementation of those issues. We're asking also, there has been a question raised about whether or not we are currently able to pay the city for the operations of this IGA. The current IGA expired in 2012, so we have been at this for a while, but I will be working with the county attorney's office to see if we need an interim IGA strictly for the purpose of ensuring timely payment to the city. And then a final element was asking that you direct us to work with the City of Tucson regarding this IGA, because the document that was presented previously by the presiding judge at the time had already been signed off on by the City of Tucson. And we are hoping to amend that on our side, so we will continue to work with the city to make sure that all amendments that we might propose are agreed to by the city as well. So that is the recommendation before you today.
Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you. I did want to acknowledge we have our county attorney Conover and our Sheriff Nanos are here, and you're both here on this issue as well. So if either of you wanted to add anything, you're welcome to. Supervisor Bronson.
You'll get used to it.
Habit, yeah.
Although Judge Bergen has created 3 working groups to discuss the initial appearance process, I note that no staff from Ajo Court, Justice Court, or Sarita Justice Court were invited to participate. I would suggest that there be a representative of a rural court added to this.
Thank you.
Any other comments?
Madam Chair.
Yes.
These recommendations are pretty comprehensive, but this is basically a working group, and their discussion is not going to be limited to just these recommendations. There will be opportunities as this thing develops for other elements that could be included but not restricted by this recommendation.
Go ahead.
Chair Grijalva, Supervisor Christie, that it's not our intent at all that if you look at the judge's description of the 3 working groups, I think they're quite robust. We just wanted to make sure that there is, that we know that there's inclusion of data, but it by no means limits the discussion.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Madam Chair,
Supervisor Brown.
just noting that there are 53 judges, commissioners, pro tems, hearing officers on the payroll of the Superior Court. While Judge Bergen is, having a discussion regarding the efficacy of initial appearances with the City of Tucson, he has yet to send out a survey or otherwise solicit comments or evaluations for the courts about the program. I would recommend he reach out to the courts for their input and satisfaction with the agreement.
Okay. Any other comments?
Chair Grijalva.
Yep. Supervisor Scott.
I would move that we approve all 5 of the recommendations put forth by the county administrator, with the addition that Supervisor Bronson made to include a representative from one of the rural courts in the working groups.
And could we also add, encourage Judge Bergen to put out a survey or solicit comments or evaluations for the courts for their input?
I would add that to my motion if that's acceptable to the seconder.
And so Supervisor Scott moved the item and Supervisor Hines seconded. Any additional discussion?
I'm sorry, Chair Grijalva.
Yes,
Just
go ahead.
wanted to offer my thanks and congratulations to Ms. Lesher for bringing different parties together. I think the board knows that when we were discussing this in the spring, there was a vast differences of opinion with regard to how to move forward with this matter, and I want to thank Ms. Lesher for putting together recommendations that have earned the support of every party that has an interest in this IGA. I think it's extraordinarily important that we have representatives from the Sheriff's Department and the Police Department in the working groups, so I was especially appreciative of that recommendation. I think the new IGA needs to address not only the concerns about initial appearances that have been raised throughout this discussion, but also the fundamental question of who should be in the jail and for how long. So I'm hopeful that the IGA that comes before us addresses all of those concerns, and I'm very grateful to Sheriff Nanos for saying in front of this board on more than one occasion that he already feels that he has the capacity to oversee a robust electronic monitoring program. And I hope that that's something that these work groups take into consideration.
Yep. And thank you. We received a letter of support from our county attorney, sheriff, and chief for Tucson Police Department. So that was appreciated, and then just recently received one from an NAACP. And so I feel really comfortable being able to move forward. Any other comments?
Yes, I'm sorry. Yeah, another comment. I mean, the speed at which we're doing initial appearances, I think you're going to find that there are some common issues. The defendant's arraignment sometimes accidentally gets to the wrong court. The warrant is not differentiating between cash bond and secured, and the list goes on. I can provide them, provide more input, but we really need, as we're speeding up the initial appearances, we got to make sure we protect the defendant's rights.
Administrator Lesher.
And just, Chair Grijalva, I just wanted to point out that you do have the acting presiding judge, Danielle Liskey, is here today, as well as the court administrator. So just if there's any questions or concerns for the court as well. Thank you.
Do we have any additional questions? We have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Item passes unanimously. Thank you. All right, so we're going to move on to item 6 on the addendum. And that is a review update of Administrative Procedure 4-1 and Board of Supervisors Policy C 2.5. Go ahead and turn it over to Legal Counsel Sam Brown. This was an item that our office initiated putting on the agenda, and essentially requests legal have an opportunity to weigh in on items that are submitted.
Thank you, Madam Chair, board members. So part of the impetus for this is just to provide another filter and another avenue over agenda items. And through an agenda committee review, that we'll be able to identify potential legal issues as they come up, and have appropriate time to do legal research and analysis before we get to the board meetings. So that's the purpose of one of the impetuses and purposes of these changes to the agenda and addendum procedure.
Okay.
Madam Chair?
Yes, Supervisor Christie.
I would like to make a motion that this item be continued to the next meeting and brought back to the board. The background in it is not clear. It's rather opaque, if at best. And I would like to see a policy, the policy shown in a red line form. In other words, what we are changing, what we are deleting, and a lot more clarity, because what I just heard was kind of an overview, not specific, and I think this deserves more than an overview and much more specificity. And I also would like to see...
I'll second your motion for purposes of discussion. Go ahead.
I'm sorry, thank you.
No, that's okay.
So if we could be provided with a red-lined document showing what the changes are, why they're being made, what they're being made over, and what the actual changes from prior policy to proposed policy are. We don't see that in the background, and I found it very unclear.
No, I appreciate that. I thought that I was pretty clear that that's what I wanted, and so when they were attached, it didn't have that information, and so I appreciate that, and I'm happy to just bring it back at our next meeting. So I don't think we need to have a vote on it per se. It really is simply adding a legal signature and adding a number 8 to one of our policies, but I appreciate that that should be something that's
And actually, you do need a motion.
Supervisor Bronson,
I'm
go
going to
ahead.
do a substitute motion to continue to our next meeting of, remind me?
7. I don't.
Okay.
Madam Chair, Supervisor Bronson, I believe that was Supervisor Christie's motion to continue to February 7th?
That's correct.
And you seconded it?
Right. I mean, I don't know that we need one, but since we've had a motion in a second.
But Chair Grijalva indicated we didn't need a motion, and we actually do need a motion for the continuance.
Well, or I can just withdraw it. It's not, but since we have a motion in a second, I'll go ahead and ask if there's any objections. We have Supervisor Christie and Supervisor Bronson seconded. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Item passes. Thank you. So we'll bring that back at our next meeting. And then I believe we are on executive session. We've bounced around. Thank you. Go ahead, Supervisor Bronson.
Move the executive session.
Second.
So I have a motion and a second by Supervisor Christie. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Item passes. We'll be in executive session until we return. Thanks. All right, thank you. We're back from executive session. The first executive session item is on the agenda, item number 7, and that was just legal advice. And then we also had executive session item number 2, legal advice, TNRS Acquisition, Inc. versus Pima County. And I'll go ahead and move that the board approve the tax counter offer for year 22 and 23.
Second.
So I have a motion and a second by Supervisor Christie. Any discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Item passes unanimously. Now we are on to approval of the consent calendar. And if you'll notice, contracts, awards, and grants will be placed on the agenda before the public hearing items and no longer on consent.
Madam Chair, I'd like to pull items 21, 22, 23.
You're going to do it anyway. I just thought it would make more sense until we can get a little bit of clarity and agreement on what should be on consent and what isn't. So, Administrator Lesher, do you have a recommendation on consent?
Madam Chair, before that, I'd like to continue on the consent calendar. Item 2, Fair Horse Racing Commission, given the comments that call to the public, to assure that there isn't a conflict.
Okay, I was going to ask for a recommendation and then see if anyone wanted to pull any items. So, County Administrator Lesher, please.
And thank you very much, Chair Grijalva. We would recommend continuing that item until February 7th, and we believe he's serving in an advisory capacity, so there's no conflict, but we can get clarity before the 7th. Absent that, we would recommend approval of the remainder of the consent calendar in its entirety.
Okay, thank you. And so, Supervisor Bronson, you'll go ahead and move the consent calendar excluding number 2?
Yes, I'll move the consent in excluding item 2.
And I'll second.
Thank you. I have a motion and a second by Supervisor Christie. Any objections? Okay. Consent passes unanimously. And we'll bring back item 2. Now we're on to item 9, and this is unfinished business from January 10th, contribution of National Association of Counties, National Center for Public Lands Counties. This is an item that was brought forward by Supervisor Scott.
I'll move the item.
So I have a motion from Supervisor Scott and a second by Supervisor Hines. Any discussion?
Chair Grijalva?
Yes, go ahead.
I wanted to draw the board's attention to the item that I asked the clerk to attach to the item yesterday, which was an email from the executive director for the County Supervisors Association of Arizona that includes a table that shows what action has been taken and what action is anticipated to be taken by our other counties. You'll note that Cochise, Coconino, Gila, Graham, Greenlee, and Yuma counties have approved the item. 2 counties, our county and Mojave, have tabled it to get additional information. And I believe Mojave had the same question that we did, wanting to know what the other counties were doing. County Supervisor Association staff indicate that they have heard from county staff in Apache, Pinal, and Santa Cruz counties that their recommendation to their boards are likely to be supportive. La Paz has declined for financial reasons. Yavapai initially declined, but they have indicated to County Supervisor Association staff that they are reconsidering the item. I really hope that we will support this item today. It is at a nominal cost spread out over 2 years. I feel that the contents of the email that we got from Mr. Sullivan address all the concerns that were raised by members of the board at our last meeting. The Center for Public Lands Counties is not only a priority for the National Association of Counties, the County Supervisors Association of Arizona, but its emphases are also supported, as you can see in the item, by our county administration and staff. I think it's an opportunity for Pima County to demonstrate leadership and to link arms with our peers in the other counties on a matter of significant concern. So I would urge approval of this item.
Any other comments? Supervisor
Madam Chair,
Christie.
I appreciate Supervisor Scott's comments. However, I'm not all that anxious or feel the urgency to link arms with our fellow counties, particularly on this item, when I believe that the County Supervisors Association has the facility and the capacity to address this issue of public land, of a National Center for Public Lands within its own structure, and that we don't need to spend roughly $80,000 to contribute to something that can be taken care of in an existent form. So I'll be voting no on this.
Okay, any other comments? All right, I'll ask for a roll call vote, please.
This is for approval. Supervisor Bronson?
Yes.
Supervisor Christie?
No.
Supervisor Hines?
Yes.
Supervisor Scott?
Yes.
Chair Grijalva?
Yes. Item passes 4-1 with Supervisor Christie voting no. Thank you. And I look forward to getting some updates on the work that's being done there, because I do think that we have a really strong record here in Pima County of putting resources and efforts to land conservation, and I'd love to be able to see us have a bigger impact at the state level, but it's good for us to get some updates on this one. All right, thank you. Item 10, County Administrator's Update. Administrator Lesher.
Thank you, Chair Grijalva. I do have a couple of comments this morning, and first wanted to recognize Shane Clark, who is our Director of Emergency Management. He's not here today, but he has been identified as a 2023 Father of the Year honoree, and it's a wonderful deal, and I know Supervisor Christie was recognized in the past. I think you told me 1997, but this is when you say, no, you weren't old enough to have children, but a huge shout out to Shane. It's a great department, and we thank him. Want to also thank our County Economic Development Department, excuse me, recognized by the Business Facilities Magazine for a 2022 Impact Award. This is for partnership and their leadership with with bringing American Battery Factory to Pima County and some of our other partners as well. Some of you have seen the publicity in the last week or so with our Pima County Wastewater Department, who does a grease collection every year so that we are not simply putting grease down the sink, and they've collected about 765 gallons of grease, which is almost 5,800 pounds of grease. So thanks to everyone who participates in that and for the department in doing it as well. A note that yesterday we welcomed back Ursula Nelson. As you know, Ursula worked with our environmental quality department for about 22 years. She retired last year, and we've unfortunately lost Barbara Escobar, who recently retired due to medical issues. So Ms. Nelson has come back for a few months while we go through the process of hiring that new director. So congratulations and welcome to Ms. Nelson, and our best wishes to Ms. Escobar and her family. And a quick thanks to all of our partners and folks out at Old Tucson. Last week, about 2,500 students from all over the county got to visit Old Tucson for annual Ted Walker Day. It's an annual event that's been terrific and a great partnership between many county departments and our PR, library, wastewater, the Sheriff's Department, and so many others. If many of you may have known Ted Walker, who was a longtime business philanthropist and a big supporter of our park system. So thanks to Old Tucson, our departments, and to the 2,500 kids who were able to participate. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. I was really glad to see Ted Walker Days return. I think that's the last few times that I've been to Old Tucson was with my kids on a field trip. So my son was super disappointed because when COVID shut down, that was his age group to go. But it's a really great event if any of you haven't had the chance to go. 2,500 kids everywhere and their parents all chaperoning. Yeah, it's good times. All right, so we're on to item 11, request to rename the Military Electronic Test Range at Fort Huachuca to the Buffalo Soldier Electronic Testing and Training Range. Do you have a motion? Do you have any recommendations? It's all in there. All right. I'll go ahead and move. So Supervisor Scott moved the item. I'll second. Any other discussion? Any objection? Item passes unanimously. Item 12, formation of a Blue Ribbon Commission, discussion, direction, action to direct the county administrator to return to the board on February 21st, 23, a plan to develop the Blue Ribbon Commission to review the needs of the Pima County Jail. Administrator Lesher.
Thank you, Chair Grijalva. And I know that in the past we have heard from Sheriff Nanos and others about a request to really look at our jail and see if it is meeting the community's needs today fully. And so what we would like to do is create what you have before you today is the request to create a commission that can help us look in a couple of different areas. First, to bring some experts out and continue to evaluate what's going on, if there's what's deferred maintenance, what's work that may need to get done at the jail. And another group of experts that can help us understand when you hear the concept of a new jail, it's not just the physical construction of such, but it may be what are the current standards and how we might want to look at additional ways to operate the jail. And then finally, a group that can help help the board understand that if there's a recommendation and a concurrence by the board to move forward with the construction of a jail, that there's some recommendations for the funding of such, whether that be the creation of a jail district, as happens in other counties in Arizona, a tax, general funds, bonds, just so that we understand the full financial implication of not only the construction but operations, and then opportunities for funding. So we're looking for creation of the commission. The recommendation first is that I would return with a list of recommended commissioners for approval by the board, and then the work being done by that commission over the next 150, 180 days so that we can return to the board with recommendations.
Okay. Board members, we have a motion?
Madam Chair, is a discussion available?
Yeah, can we have a motion just to get it on the... I'll go ahead and move the item for sake of discussion.
Second.
Thank you. I have a motion and a second by Supervisor Scott. Supervisor Christie.
Thank you, Madam Chair. At very worst, the old saying and the old adage that good ideas go to blue ribbon commissions to die. At very best, I think this is premature, and I think we also have the capacity within our county administration, particularly in facilities management, to procure and to attract local construction companies, ask them for their assistance, perhaps even a bid request for their time and analysis to present to the county and then the county to the board the findings of a selected construction company or companies of a local nature, that can give some direction, some indication, some idea of the condition of the jail and the capacity for it to be remediated or corrected as needed or completely rebuilt. I think it's premature to put all of this over to a blue ribbon panel, and I would suggest that the county facilitate finding either one or several construction companies to present their findings to the board, and then at that point, if it is deemed necessary, we consider a blue ribbon panel. But before we do that, let's get an evaluation of the jail facility from experts, look at their results, bring it to the board, make a determination at that point if we in fact need a blue ribbon panel, or in any event how we should proceed on this nature. But I will be voting against forming a blue ribbon panel at this time.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions or comments?
Chair Grijalva.
Yes, Supervisor Scott.
Just a couple of questions for Ms. Lesher, if I could. Even though, if approved, we're going to get a plan with a charter for the Commission's work, could you offer a brief overview of the areas of focus for each of the three Commission committees, facilities, finances, and operations?
Chair Grijalva, Supervisor Scott, yes, I think we had been identified three areas, and the first being really to look at the facility exactly as described by Supervisor Christie. We hope that we can get structural engineers, individuals within our community who are working, in the industry to help understand what really is occurring there. Many of you have had an opportunity to look at the jail. We want to understand what's structural, what's deferred maintenance, what might need to occur. A second element then is, as we've indicated, are there national experts who can opine on the actual operations of the jail? By that, are there new methods or new models of actually the maintaining and operating a detention facility, and how we deal with those who are incarcerated, and the viewing, the capacity, the oversight. And then, as I mentioned, the third area is to begin to get a sense of what the financial opportunities might be. The desire to get all three of those areas working simultaneously is so that we don't end up, if a committee were to come back and say, yes, we need a new structure, we need a new physical structure, that we've already moved forward with an idea about how we might fund that or finance it should it need to occur, rather than having the three different kinds of areas that we might be looking at one after another rather than simply concurrently. And then another element, and I understand Supervisor Christie's concerns about where ideas go to die, and that's why I hope we've indicated that we will be reporting back on a regular basis with not only approval of the representation of the members of the Commission, but what the mission statement and goals for the group would be, along with the timeline to return regularly to the board with updates.
And just to follow up on that presentation, Ms. Lesher, will the Commission be making recommendations to the board or offering options to the board for our consideration?
Chair Grijalva, Supervisor Scott, I'm not sure I'm understanding the difference, but I believe that they will be making recommendations to the board that will include options.
Okay. You can go one way or the other. You can make a very strong recommendation saying this is what the Blue Ribbon Commission is encouraging the board to do, or you can say here are 2 or 3 options that the board might consider. I just wondered what we're more likely to get, A or B.
Supervisor Grijalva, Supervisor Scott, with the mission statement and the structure not yet developed, I don't know what that would be. I think when we bring it back to the board, we would welcome the direction from the board of what you would like to see come back from the Commission.
And then the only other question I had, Chair Grijalva, is who are the other county employees referenced in the item that will join representatives from the Sheriff's Department as Commission staff?
Chair Grijalva, Supervisor Scott, I don't have the full list, but I can tell you we're looking at individuals to support it from our finance department, for example, who will be helping with looking at some of what's occurring, what the financial opportunities might be. So we might be bringing in some of those individuals. We're going to need some county folk to help staff this organization. So depending, we'll have individuals as well from facilities management to help staff it. We're looking at limited representation from county staff and hoping that we're bringing in community and national experts to really inform the recommendations.
Thank you.
Madam Chair.
Supervisor Christie.
Along with this analysis by the contractors, and to bring that to the board, the county needs to be thinking at the same time, what is going to be the status of the certificates of participation that are issued on the current jail? What happens to them and how are they affected? So that's another issue that I think should be taken after we find out exactly the condition of the jail and what it would cost from the evaluation of the contractors that we do before a blue ribbon panel. Thank you.
Thank you.
Chair,
Yes, Supervisor Hines.
Thank you, and also County Administrator. And having just been in the jail myself, I have some ideas as to what they're going to find, but I'll wait to see what they say. Will there be representatives on the commission that will look at who is in the jail and whether or not they should be? And by that I mean, we've heard multiple times that there are something like 2/3 of these folks are nonviolent offenders. We could track them safely other ways to the community, meaning, you know, the sheriff has said this multiple times. Will there be, I guess, representatives from the county attorney, from adult, probation, and these other kinds of things that will be on this commission as well?
And Chair Grijalva, Supervisor Hines, that is not the focus of this commission at this time, and I think that one thing that I know the sheriff and I have talked about, as well as others involved as we deal with all of the issues related to crime in the community and homelessness and things that we've been evaluating, just as you speak, who's in the jail, are the right individuals there. I think that an opportunity to have a conversation with representatives of the behavioral health community and as well as the public defense services, the county attorney, all of that is an important conversation to take place with the sheriff and others, but that really has not been the focus of this commission at this time.
Administrator Lesher, so we are going to be looking, though, at the facility, the structural needs, whether there's deferred maintenance, whether there was faulty construction from, because there's a lot of people have sort of contributed to this conversation in a bunch of different ways. I do think, though, it's important if the part of this commission look at the size and capacity of the jail and whether it's important for us to factor in what the population is at some point, for us to look at whether we need to be looking at something larger, something smaller, the way the design be totally different. All of those are factors that I think are really important. And when staff and I had the opportunity with Sheriff Nanos to walk around the jail and look at some of the different populations, it was pretty telling that we have other needs in our community as well that may not, some of the people in the jail could be better served by being in rehabilitation or some other facility, and I think that all of those factors are important for us to be able to look at.
Madam Chair?
Yes,
just to reiterate, I think we're getting ahead of ourselves by going into the policy and how the sheriff, who is a duly elected official, runs his operation. What we should be dealing with does not require a blue ribbon panel. It requires experts to analyze and to evaluate the current condition of the jail, its ability to be rehabilitated or remediated, or its need to be completely bulldozed and start over. But we start getting into how many people are in the jail, should they be there. The actual operation is far, far ahead of what we need to do, even far ahead of putting together a blue ribbon panel. So let's get it evaluated. Let's get an analysis of its condition, some dollars and cents issues here before us on the actual facility itself, and then worry about the other items later.
Well, and I think that's what I'm hearing from Administrator Lesher, and after reading that that's what this blue ribbon commission is going to do, so I'm in favor of supporting it. The other factor is some of the things that are going on in the jail, our sheriff doesn't have control over. And so I think it's important for us to look at the umbrella of how the courts and the county, how we all, our county administrator, how it's all working together. And I think that may be bigger than what this blue ribbon commission is doing, but when we get recommendations that come back to the board, I do think that they have to be comprehensive. So we do have a motion and a second. I'll go ahead and ask for a roll call vote, please.
Chair Grijalva.
Yes.
Just before we vote, I was note that the sheriff is present, and I wondered if we wanted to ask if he had any comments to make to the board on the item. No?
Anything missing? Okay. if you want to go ahead and come to, I mean, either that or I can say, no, he doesn't have any comment into the mic. Otherwise, we just hear a mumbling. Yeah.
Ms. Fletcher and I have both spoken, and I've seen her proposal, and I support those efforts. Yeah.
Thank you. So
and as to everybody else's concern as to who's in the jail and that I agree that should be something else that is ongoing as well. So.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. So we have a motion and a second. Roll call.
Okay. Supervisor Bronson?
No.
Supervisor Christie?
No.
Supervisor Hines?
Yes.
Supervisor Scott?
Yes.
Chair Grijalva?
Yes. Item passes 3-2 with Supervisor Bronson and Christie voting against. All right. Now we're on to item 13. Thank you, Sheriff Nanos, for staying with us. Item 13, dedication of the right-of-way, resolution number 2023-2.
Move the item.
Second.
So I have a motion by Supervisor Bronson, a second by Supervisor Scott. Any objection? Any comments? Okay, item passes unanimously. Item number 14 is a canvas. And
Move
this
the
is,
item.
hold on a second, I'm going to read it. This is the special school election results of November 8th for the Catalina Foothills, Marana Unified, Sahuarita Unified, and Tanca Verde Unified. So I have a motion by Supervisor Bronson. I'll second. Any objection and discussion? Okay, item passes unanimously. Now we're on to contract and award. This is information that has historically been on the consent agenda. I'll go ahead and move, unless there's an objection, move item 16, 15, 16, and 17.
Madam Chair,
Supervisor Christie.
You want to divide the
I'd like
question?
to divide the question into both 15.
Okay, so we'll go ahead and move on to 15. 15 is community workforce development. It's a step up to justice to provide emergency eviction legal services. Extend the contract term to January 31st, 2024, in the contract amount of $60,000. I'll go ahead and move the item.
Second.
So I have a motion and a second by Supervisor Supervisor Scott, Supervisor Christie.
Thank you. I'm curious. We are hiring Step Up to Justice to provide for emergency eviction legal services. First of all, we've got a big tower across the street full of attorneys that could easily, I would think, be able to capacitate this problem rather than having to hire an outside firm. Step Up to Justice, which I'm not particularly familiar with. And this is being funded with COVID-related monies, but it doesn't say anything about COVID being the cause of this problem. And what happens when the COVID monies runs out to this program? Is this going to be another creeping mission that's going to become institutionalized? And again, on the agenda item, there's no mention of COVID, and in the background, there's no mention of COVID except for one thing: how it's going to be funded. It's going to be used by COVID monies. And to me, I think it's contradictory. The COVID money does not apply to this particular item. There's no mention of it. And we do not need to find an outside agency to operate in this capacity when we have divisions and departments within our county administration, within our county attorney, that handles these things. And all we have to do is look across the street at the old Tucson Federal Savings Tower. Lots of attorneys there, so I will be voting against this.
Okay, Administrator Lesher, did you want to respond to that or have staff respond?
Yeah, and thank you, Chair Grijalva, and I will ask Dr. Garcia to address it, but just this is the continuation. It's a program that has been going on, that a lot of our programs related to eviction and keeping people in their homes became initial programs funded through the COVID dollars because of the concerns that were coming up during the pandemic regarding eviction and this continuation of service. But Dr. Garcia, I think you have additional specifics.
Certainly. Chair Grijalva, Supervisor Christie, Administrator Lesher, a couple things to sort of keep in mind. The board authorized the creation of the Emergency Eviction Legal Services Program now more than a year ago. And at that time, the funding that was identified for that was coronavirus-related funding through ARPA. That we have made sure that that continues to be the appropriate source of funding and that there is no conflict in terms of how the Department of Treasury would see the use of these funds. So these funds are being used in the manner in which they were intended to from a federal standpoint. You approved a series of contracts with outside legal counsel. Previously, this one is out of sequence. This would be the fifth contract. There are real procedural and legal reasons that I'm sure the county attorney could speak to as to why we can't just assign PCAO attorneys to represent or participate in these cases. Those reasons, like I said, are for the lawyers to speak about, not for me. What this program does is it allows us to bring these resources to the table, both to the service of landlords and tenants, and to try to adjudicate these or to help resolve these conflicts when they do occur.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, so I have a motion and a second. I'll go ahead and ask for a roll call vote, please.
Okay, this is for approval. Supervisor Bronson?
No.
Supervisor Christie?
No.
Supervisor Hines?
Yes.
Supervisor Scott?
Yes.
Chair Grijalva?
Yes, item passes 3-2 with Supervisor Bronson and Christie voting against. All right, okay.
I'll move items 16 and 17.
All right.
I do have a question on 17.
See, we're just going to go with 16. I'm trying, but do you want to go ahead and move item? You want to go ahead and move item 16, and I'll do 7, and I'll second. So Supervisor Bronson moves, and I second. Item 16 is Arizona Aviation Associates. This is an amendment number 2 to provide sheriff's hangar lease located on 1840 East Valencia. Supervisor Christie, you had a question?
Not on this one.
All right. Any objection? Okay, we voted in favor, so that item passes. Now 17, City of Tucson to provide intergovernmental agreement for implementation of a regional 311 system that will provide a central source of management for all 311 within the county, and this is a no-cost 5-year term. Did you want? Okay, so I move the item, and you'll second. Go ahead, Supervisor Christie.
Thank you. Just a couple of questions. I will be voting for this, but my 2 questions are, why is the City of Tucson the lead agency when this is a county-wide program? And what about other municipalities involved in the whole system? It mentions nothing about the other jurisdictions and municipalities in the county. And again, why isn't Pima County taking the first position on this issue when it's a county-wide program?
Thank you, and if I may, Chair Grijalva and Supervisor Christie, we have Deputy County Administrator Holmes is here along with our IT Director Javier Baca, as well as individuals and representatives from the City of Tucson to explain that. So I'd like to ask Deputy County Administrator Steve Holmes to speak first to this item.
Absolutely. I'll just start with Chair Grijalva, Supervisor Christie, start with the second of your questions. The IGA does allow for other municipalities to actually participate in this agreement. The reason why we started with the 2 municipalities between the city and the county has been the city owns, just for context, the city owns the cellular line of 311, and we own the landline. The city has stood up their cellular line, and it has been in some temporary operation. It made sense because it's going to be housed in their 911 center. They have fully staffed their 911 center, and I apologize, recognize Sharon McDonough, who runs that center, was here earlier, had to leave, and Jeff Kuhn from the city is here as well. We've been working in collaboration with them. It just made sense at the time. This was a conversation that started probably like in 2017, Supervisor Christie, up into 20 to transfer the line, and that decision was made long ago. But now that we see there's resources stood up by the city, it makes sense in this collaborative efforts for them to play the lead, knowing full well that the IGA gives us the latitude to make decisions in conjunction with them, and then make decisions if it's not working out to pull out of the agreement as well.
Thank you. That answers my questions, Madam Chair.
Okay, and thank you for being here. We appreciate you being here. All right, so I have a motion and a second. Any objections? All right, item passes. All in favor? Yay. All right, that's 5-0. Now we're going to go to procurement. I was hoping to take these together, 18 through 22.
I just have a question on number 20.
I'll move all of those items, and then if there's a second, we can answer.
I'll go ahead and second. And Supervisor Christie, you had a question on item 20?
Yes. Coming from a automotive background, this kind of piqued my interest. There's only one bid, and that bid is out of California, and there's only one brand that's being bid upon, and that brand is Toyota. So we've got no bids, only one bid received for, what was it, 30 some odd vehicles, one brand, out of state, out of town. Just find that very odd when we're trying to be competitive here in our bidding.
And you probably don't particularly care for that make of car.
Now, if these were Chryslers or Jeeps, it might be a whole different story.
Administrator Lesher, did you want to respond, or how long was the bid out?
Chair Grijalva, let me ask Deputy County Administrator Holmes to speak to the procurement process about that.
Chair Grijalva, Supervisor Christie, the purpose of this master agreement is to add Toyota as another option of vehicles that we can purchase. It's not exclusive to Toyotas, but as it currently stands, Toyota is not an option for us, and given the lack of vehicle inventory that's out there, this gives us some other options by which we can choose to purchase.
And I did notice, Madam Chair, Deputy Director Holmes, or Administrator Holmes, that the bid process, the bid sheet, was filled out by hand.
I don't know if there's a question.
What is the significance of that? It's like, I got to get this in here real quick.
Chair Grijalva, Supervisor Christie, there's no significance on it, but I can make sure that we can check the handwriting and trace it back to who wrote it up and have that discussion.
Okay.
It was legible, but thank you.
All right, so we had a motion by Supervisor Bronson. I seconded. Any other discussion? Any opposition? Okay, items pass unanimously, so that was 18 through 22. Now we're on 23. This is real property.
If nobody wishes to divide the question, I'll move 23 and 24.
Second.
Okay, so we have a motion by Supervisor Bronson and second by Supervisor Christie for 23 and 24. Any discussion, objections? Both of those items pass unanimously. And now we're on a hearing for liquor license. Is there anyone here for, this is a Series 6 bar. Any opposition to this item? Item 25, liquor license. Okay, so
I'll move to close public hearing and approve the item.
Thank you, and that's
Second.
in your district. And Supervisor Christie seconds. Any discussion, objection? Okay, item passes unanimously. So now we're on the addendum. And we are at item number 3, amended meeting schedule for March of 2023. I put this item on the agenda because in going through schedules for school, I realized that we have a board meeting on the 21st of March, which is spring break for 2 of our big districts in town. And I'm wondering if this board would be able or willing to move the meeting to March 28th in order to allow county employees to spend some time with their families.
Madam Chair, I will not be available on the 28th.
Okay.
And Madam Chair, I think that our county employees are given a very generous work plan and much time off, and I think it sends a bad message of trying to rearrange the standing first and third Tuesday of the month, and it's a matter of posting, and it's a matter of sending out information to the public that these are our dates and our regular meeting schedule. I think it's going to cause confusion, and I understand that people like to go on vacations, but I think that's above and separate from what this board meeting schedule should be about.
You're right. As soon as Supervisor Bronson said she couldn't be there, then that would be the end of the item, because I think it's important that we all be there and that there's unanimous support to be able to move it. So since that didn't happen, we don't even have to vote on the item, right? Okay, so item number 4 is a meeting schedule from June through December of 2023. I think that it would be nice for everyone to be able to plan out those vacations that we want employees to take. And so if we, and we've sent this out to different community members regarding religious holidays and looked at school calendars when we can make accommodations. And so I'll go ahead and move approval.
You need a second.
Yes, and Supervisor Hines seconds. Thank you.
Madam Chair?
Yes, Supervisor Christie.
Here again, there are changes to the schedule out of the ordinary, and that's in July. Is there an explanation for what that is?
We normally would have just one meeting.
Right. I think that it was important for us to have the opportunity to have more meetings and just minimally have 2. We also have 3 newer board members that would, if there isn't a demand for that meeting for other items, we could absolutely have a study session or some other things. But I thought it was important for us to continue to work through the summer because I think it's important and we still have business, so.
Well, it seems to have done the board pretty well for a number of years. You can attest to those.
At least 10 years.
So I see no need to change the schedule from what its norm has been, and I won't be approving this item.
Thank you. Any other discussion?
I will be voting no.
Okay. Any other questions, discussion? So, did I make a motion? Yes, and a second. Okay, so, and Supervisor Hines seconds. Okay, we'll have a roll call vote, please.
Okay, this is for approval of the board schedule as presented. Supervisor Bronson?
No.
Supervisor Christie?
No.
Supervisor Hines?
Yes.
Supervisor Scott?
Yes.
Chair Grijalva?
Yes, item passes 3-2 with Supervisor Bronson and Christie voting no. All right, now we're on item number 5, Tucson Crime-Free Coalition. I actually do have a legal concern about when this item was posted and the information that was provided regarding transparency for our agendas. And I'm wondering if Council Brown, we discussed this, because if you look at it as far as just the agenda item as it was submitted before our county administrator attached some information, if you don't know what Tucson Crime-Free Coalition is or their efforts, or you're in Phoenix or somewhere else reading our agenda, it really didn't provide any information as to what we were going to be discussing. So, yeah.
Chair Grijalva, I think that to the point you're making, the description talks about Pima County's regional plan to reduce crime on the streets, which I think was the intent of the item. And so I think the issue you're raising is just the title, Tucson Crime-Free Coalition. In the future, if there can be explanations for names of organizations or phrases, and or to have items more specifically titled in a way that reflects what the intent of the item was.
Yeah.
I'm confused. Could you elaborate? That just sounded like legalese to me.
So
could you be more specific?
Yeah, Chair Grijalva, Supervisor Bronson. So the title is Tucson Crime-Free Coalition, but to those who may not know what that organization is, it's just the name of an organization.
So how would you phrase it then, if you were to put it on the agenda?
The title would be Pima County's regional plan to reduce crime, or something to that effect, rather than the names of specific organizations.
But, okay, so if it was put on the agenda that way, we could still talk about Tucson Crime-Free Coalition during the discussion. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Right. I think the concern is it's not even the content of the conversation, is if you're looking at it and don't know what the agenda is. You don't know anything about the organization or the organization. When you open up the item, all that's there is a memo. Now, our county administrator sort of didn't get necessarily direction as to what she should be putting together in a report, but she put together a report. So I just think it's important for us to be real clear on what it is that we're asking for.
Chair Grijalva?
Yes.
Could I ask?
Supervisor Scott.
Could I ask, and I hope this is in order, but the item that we continued dealing with preparation of the agenda and the addendum, if we could get some direction from Mr. Brown about how to address issues so that all board members can put items on either the agenda or the addendum and know that they're cleared for the topic that the member wants to discuss.
Right. Okay. Thank you. Yep.
But we're still...
Yes, we can go. Yes, and I think that because Administrator Lesher put together a memo, we can base this conversation around the memo. And so, County Administrator Lesher, did you want to review any pieces of this before I ask Supervisor Christie what he wanted to address?
Madam Chair, actually, my whole intent was to have the County Administrator give us an update based on her memo, and that if there's going to be any questions or any prompting of further discussion, that'll happen. But I found that the memo covered quite a big deal. Now, my concern, and I have another concern later in the agenda, that the media doesn't seem to be covering this very much. So it's important, I think, for this board, particularly the County Administrator, to inform the public in the feeling of full transparency what is going on and what plans have changed and what developments have come out of this coalition and the county administration.
And Chair Grijalva and Supervisor Christie, we did distribute a report yesterday on a variety of activities, but I would like to ask Mr. Holmes to please walk through many of the steps. He has been the staff on our side who's been point on the efforts, and thank you.
Chair Grijalva and Supervisor Christie, as you can, what's outlined in the memo is an update specifically on the pretrial annex that we're calling at the Mission Road. So previously we had discussed converting that particular Mission annex into a place where we could move pretrial services, which currently is adjacent to the jail, and then add wraparound service providers in a pod that is part of the current layout, with the hope that we could, over time, stand up a detox center there at the Mission Annex. That plan had continued forward. The major concern that developed over our conversations of putting that plan together was this idea of custodialship, and I'll break that down a little bit. Part of the whole design of the plan was for all the municipalities who participate in our pretrial service function to be able to drop off or take folks through pretrial there at the annex, and if they had to go to booking, about half of the folks that come through our pretrial support services are actually booked back into the jail. Currently, the way the system works is the officer parks right by pretrial, takes them in. If they're denied, then they walk them to booking over at the jail annex. The design and the desired design with the pretrial annex at Mission Road was to allow for, if that was a decision that was made, to allow that particular individual to stay there under the custodialship of another officer who could then take them down to the booking modular over at the jail. The reason for that was it would save time for the officers who have to wait, sometimes hours, right, because of staffing concerns, to actually stand and wait at the booking modular, and when we really want them out on the streets, right? And so the issue, what transpired, and a legitimate concern from both our sheriff and from the pretrial staff, was that of their safety and security. What we found out is that we cannot have civilian security there doing custodialship, meaning if I am transferring as a police officer to another person to then go take them to booking, they have to be post-certified, meaning they have to be a certified officer, like a sheriff's department officer or someone that's working off duty. The complexity of that design has forced us to look at other options, because we still believe there's a good intent in this plan. We believe that getting services to folks, and I know Mr. Jacobson referred to it earlier, getting folks services and quickly in real time to them being released is of critical importance, not only for the services needed, but to reduce recidivism. And so the plan B that's outlined in this particular memo is to look at putting a modular actually adjacent to the current existing structure of pretrial services. So we would not move pretrial in this plan B. Pretrial would stay where it currently is, adjacent to the jail, to mitigate any kind of the safety concerns, security concerns with not having post-certified officers there, and put a modular that will allow us to do the wraparound services there at the jail or adjacent to the jail. The benefit of that, having kind of ran a little bit more of analysis, which is outlined in the jail, is the numbers of folks that are served through pretrial services on average is around 400 a month. If you do the math and figure about 50% of those 400 are released over the course of the month, and average that over the course of a month, you're looking at about 7 people being released, going through our current kind of desired design at the annex through those service providers. By having the service providers adjacent to the jail, we can benefit not only from the 7 that will go through the pretrial and be denied, but also the potential of allowing folks who are being released from jail, roughly 80 a day. I mean, these are just average numbers, twice a day, that have to be released to pretrial service anyway as they leave, could then be referred to from the jail to the module that we're planning to place next to pretrial services there by the jail. Again, the benefit of being able to service the population that's leaving the jail is of significance, because those are folks that really need help right away, right? So we're looking at the advantage of that now versus what we're doing at the annex. We're not abandoning the annex. I still think it's a good plan to redesign that center, particularly with the needs of the sheriff, but there's a lot of custodialship issues associated with trying to develop that into a kind of facility that it's going to meet the needs of our community and reduce crime. But we figured in the interim, with the staffing concerns, it makes sense to explore this modular right adjacent to the jail and really try to capitalize on those folks leaving the jail to get the services necessary, coordinating, of course, with our sheriff and coordinating with pretrial services to make that a reality. So right now we're exploring that as a secondary option to the original plan. A timeline specific to when we could get a modular stood up there, we're still working on that we will definitely report back on. Concurrently, as we're having conversations with crime-free, there are 3 areas that we discussed as well. They're outlined in the memo. This is a conversation that has happened in collaboration with the city, which is looking at panhandling signs across our community and in the medians to see what we could put there. There is an ordinance issue specific with the city that I will explore a little bit further to figure out how we can move in that direction. I would definitely have to loop in the sheriff because there's some enforcement parts of that, but exploring signs that actually will not only discourage, but also potentially help folks get money who are contributing to the needs of our homeless community as well. And so there's a way to do this where we can have meetings and not create a problem for folks who use that as their only money-making opportunity, which is certainly...
basically, Madam Chair, basically what your new signage would say is to discourage paying to the panhandlers, but instead donating to social service agencies.
Sure, Grihava, Supervisor Creasy, that's correct. Those are the signs that we've seen across other municipalities that we're exploring as well. The second part of the collaboration is also discussing the potential of streamlining efforts for a lot of our businesses who are wanting to put lighting in their at their businesses, which requires permitting. So there's some frustration over permitting, more specific to the city, but we know our developmental services are a model for a lot of this and could maybe help out if we can work with them to see we don't know what help out really means right now. We're going to have a more substantive discussion with our development service officers office to be more supportive, but at least try to outline that process and try to streamline that particular issue. And then equally important, as we've seen a lot of rains, we've been talking about ordinances in the washes, right? That seems to be a place where we're seeing concerns with folks that are using the wash, right, for encampments being swept up by rains and waters. And so are there other ordinances that we can help to increase the safety there with the unsheltered community as well? So those are kind of 3 areas that we're working on concurrently, but the main piece of work that we believe is of importance for the public to know is that we're looking at another plan that is going to address some of the issues about wraparound services and looking at making it adjacent to the jail versus the annex that we can continue to explore longer term.
Thank you.
Thank you. Very good update. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Chair Grijalva.
Yes, Supervisor Scott.
Thank you. Mr. Holmes, to continue in the line of questioning that Supervisor Christie initiated, reading the memo that Ms. Lesher attached to this item and listening to your presentation, is it fair to say that the addition of another modular structure next to the existing pretrial services structure would allow pretrial services to address more people in both pre-booking and the release from jail?
Chair Grijalva, Supervisor Scott. So I don't believe they're going to be address more people, because the number of people that are coming in are the number of people coming in, right, who are committing crime. I think what we're hoping that that we address more people through social services by being adjacent to the jail.
And that's what I meant.
Yes.
And the memo made reference to the fact that currently when people are being released from the jail, they don't have that same access to the wraparound services. So the way I read the memo is that it was going to be a boon both to the pre-booking procedure and also to people as they're being released from the jail. I'm sorry if I phrased the question clumsily.
No. Chair Grijalva, Supervisor Scott. No, I just want to make sure we're definitely on the same page on that. The current existing structure, just to kind of just belabor it a little bit, at the annex, we would not benefit, the folks leaving the jail, it's too far away, they would not walk on there on their own, because they're being released, right? There's no way we could shepherd that kind of transportation to the annex. This gives us a better shot of addressing that by trying to get folks closer to the exit door of the jail to those social services, so yes.
And then just a follow-up question with regard to the annex. The memo from Ms. Lesher made reference to broader social service efforts like a detox facility in the Mission Annex still being perhaps a matter of consideration. Could you expand on this and speak to us about likely uses for the Mission Annex if the second option with the additional modular is adopted?
Chair Grijalva, Supervisor Scott, we still believe additional detox space is super important, but it has to be managed by the right folks, right? We have been in conversations with Community Bridges, who runs our local detox facilities. They currently have capacity to actually take more folks if we can coordinate those efforts. That being said, as we see the fentanyl increase and crisis around not only our community across the United States, it's important to really think about how we can make best use of facilities that we currently have, and detox seems to be one of those areas that would be a good investment for us. There at the annex, right? There seems to be the building and structure that would allow that to occur. We long-term there still believe that there's designs and models nationally that the annex could function as. And let me give an example. We had been exploring, and this is not the only example, but one that I'm familiar with because I had conversations with some folks there in Bexar County of San Antonio. They have an annex facility there, which is it's a 24-hour operation, and of course, it's a long-term vision, and this may be superseded by a new jail potentially, but I'll give you what, using current structures, where there you have not only 24-hour support services that are available to folks there, but you also have availability of our public defenders, you have availability of the prosecuting office there, you have transportation availability. So it becomes this kind of one-stop center that would be a really potential good vision for that facility if we could kind of work in collaboration with existing partners across the United States and kind of see where they're doing well and where we can benefit from what they already have in place. But that's just an example of the design. I think there's discussions around potential residential treatment there as well and supporting that. The issue then it goes down to custodialship, right? There's still that question, right? And so if anything we do there is a requirement of the courts, then it becomes a custodial issue. It means that we're going to have staff from the sheriff there to help support it. Anything that's voluntary as a condition of release where people can come and go makes it a little bit more palatable from a security standpoint if we can move in that direction. And of course, residential treatment is not necessarily a custodial issue, but depending how we stand that up, it could have some security concerns as well.
Well, it sounds like the second option outlined in Ms. Lesher's memo follows through with the unanimous vote of the board with regard to the expansion of pretrial services, while also having the salutary effect of offering the Mission Annex for perhaps some other ways of providing wraparound services to those who need them in our community. Thank you, Chair Grijalva.
Thank you. And I know Deputy Administrator Holmes, you're working with the city in a lot of these efforts to provide these kind of wraparound services, because I know the mayor's office is also going through this process of gathering input and providing services. And so I think it's important that as we look towards solutions and working together, that's why I think it's more important for us to really focus on the work that we're each doing collectively with different community partners, as opposed to framing this around one organization, because it really isn't. This work is a lot of different municipalities and different organizations. All right, thank you. Okay, so we've moved item 6, and now we're on item 7, differential water rate lawsuit, and this is a request by Supervisor Christie to get an update. There was a memo attached to this item, and basically there is no update. Is there anything else you wanted to add, Supervisor Christie?
Yeah, again, along the same lines, that this really is not obtaining much media attention, and it's a very important issue in my district, as well as the fact that City of Tucson has just instituted some more water rate increases. So if the county administrator could just give a quick synopsis of the memorandum that she provided, and after you're done, I do have a question.
Chair Grijalva, Supervisor Christie, unfortunately, as we said in the notice earlier this week, or in preparation for today's meeting, we don't have new information right now. The final, the update right now is we are looking at depositions of 3 of the final experts that are to occur on February 21st. And following that, we believe that the court then will set a trial date, and that we hope that that's going to start in the spring. As you know, it's been a long time coming through this, but we have been looking at, as I say, they've begun depositions. We have provided you that list of some of the experts who are going to continue to be deposed on behalf of the county, and we are hoping that by the end of February, we will have a trial date.
Okay, Madam Chair, Ms. Lesher, just for a public affirmation and to put it on the record, there is no way that you as county administrator or any of your administrative staff or the county attorney's office, even though they're not involved directly in this litigation, none of those entities I just outlined would move to settle this issue, this case, without coming to the board first.
Chair Grijalva, Supervisor Christie, we wouldn't and we can't. It's up to this board to make decisions regarding that litigation, and it is moving forward.
Thank you very much.
Any other questions? Supervisor Hines.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just curious, what is the, and if you have it for the City of Tucson, that'd be great too, but just how much have we spent at the county on this effort? And if you know anything about how much the City of Tucson, that'd be great to know that number as well.
Chair Grijalva, Supervisor Hines, in outside legal fees, Pima County has spent, I believe, about $226,000. I do not know how much the city has spent. Happy to get that information and report out.
Okay. Any other questions? All right. Item 9 was pulled, so we're on item 10, AT&T Corp. To provide the 911 Managed Services Program General Fund. This is a 3-year term for
If nobody wishes to divide the question, I'd be happy to move items 10, 11, 12, oh no, not 12, 10 and 11.
10 and 11.
I do have a question on 11.
Okay, so 10, I'll second.
Okay.
All right. Have a motion and a second for item 10. Any discussion? Objection? Item passes unanimously. Item 11.
Move the item.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Supervisor Bronson, a second by Supervisor Christie. This is to provide software suite for IT. Supervisor Christie, you have a question?
Yeah, thank you. Could I get a non-technical description of what we're buying and why?
Administrator Lesher, Deputy Administrator.
Chair Grijalva, Supervisor Christie, this is in relation to one of the suites in our ERP. The CLIC is a data transfer reporting product. It's currently in use and it's set to expire. So it's a product that we currently use. It's set to expire. It came forward. The reason why it was delayed here, it was wrapped up into our whole ERP process that we're moving for another date that's being continued. But this one's one that's expired and needed to get approved because it's currently in use.
Madam Chair, what is the purpose? What are we trying to do here?
Sure. I'm trying not to use technical terms, but I may need to phone a friend right now that's sitting next to me to give you a little bit more of details. I apologize, Supervisor Christie, but our director for ADG, who uses this product daily, I'm going to ask Scott Zufelt to answer that question.
Chair Grijalva, Supervisor Christie.
We can't hear you.
Try to move closer to the mic. Thank you. Thank you.
Chair Grijalva, Supervisor Christie. This is a reporting software suite. It is also used for data acquisition, for copying data from a source system into a data warehouse so that we can answer your questions with information.
Now I see. Perfect. Thank you, Madam Chair.
So we have a motion and a second. Any other questions, objections? Item passes unanimously. Now we're on item 12, Worldview Enterprises, Inc. to provide operating agreement for the operation administration of Spaceport Tucson, no cost, 20-year term. I'm going to turn this over to Administrator Lesher.
I'll move the item.
And I'll second, and then I do want to ask why this wasn't included in the item for our last meeting, but go ahead.
And Chair Grijalva, we did, it indicated unfortunately this would be brought back today. We were not able to do it together. I'd like to ask Deputy County Administrator DeBonis to address this issue.
Thank you.
Madam Chair and Supervisors, so this is a 20-year agreement with Worldview Enterprises to manage the operations of the publicly available spaceport. So this previously was an agreement in place with the prior lease purchase agreement that has now been replaced with a new lease purchase agreement. As the county administrator indicated, this piece was not able to be completed to bring along with the new lease purchase agreement at your last meeting, so it has followed to you today.
Okay. Questions?
Yes, Madam Chair.
Supervisor Christie.
That first lease agreement that we dealt with at the last meeting, as I indicated, was rushed. We had roughly a couple of days to discern the new lease agreement. It was very controversial, as I indicated, and that I tried to move it for continuation so we could have more time to go through the details and put it out to the public so everyone knew what was happening. Was this overlooked in that rush and forgotten about, and then after the last board meeting somebody went, uh-oh, we didn't include this part? Is this a rush in the form of the rush? Was this something that was overlooked?
So, Madam Chair, Supervisor Christie, was not overlooked in the prior communication to the board by the county administrator. It indicated that this particular agreement for the operation of the spaceport would follow. So the agreements required legal review, and we had documents that were lengthy, as you can see from this particular item, that needed to be reviewed by all of the parties, Worldview Pima County, our legal counsel in the Pima County Attorney's Office, outside legal counsel. It was just a matter of the volume of materials that needed to be put together and brought forward to the board. So this was not a forgotten item. It was intended to come back to the board at this date.
Any other questions? Okay, so I had a motion and a second. Any objection?
I object.
Okay. Any other objections? Item passes 4-1. Supervisor Christie voting no.
Madam Chair, if nobody wishes to divide the question, I'll move items 13 under Sheriff and items 14 Board, Commission, and our committee. I'll move those items.
I'll second if there's no objection. Okay, so Supervisor Bronson moved the item and I second for 13 and 14. Any objections? Okay, item passes unanimously. That is the end of our meeting. This meeting is adjourned. Thank you so much for your attention and for being here.